was told moments ago that you requested a little meeting with Guillermo before the show.
Yeah, ¿dónde está Guillermo?
And he's over there.
Oh, Guillermo, hola.
And then he spoke exclusively in Espanol for that.
Sí,
Yeah. How was his Spanish, Guillermo?
Perfecto.
Perfecto.
That means perfect.
Perfect. Okay,
good. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell. General Powell, good morning.
Good morning, how are you all?
Well, thank you for joining us. What are your thoughts?
The stories and then more. With us now is retired General Colin Powell, who served as President Bush's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the first Gulf War. He was also President Reagan's National Security Advisor and Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. General, so good to have you here this morning. That story, too, really. What about the president's personal place in his country?
Well, it's going to be hard to top that video.
Thank you, Rick.
So I'm just curious, when you were growing up in the South Bronx, your parents are immigrants from Jamaica. Did you ever expect to live a life of the type that you lived?
When you care to share, Colin?
I get this question very, very often. When you were growing up in the South Bronx, child of immigrants, my parents came here on boats from Jamaica, born in Harlem, very in the South Bronx. I kind of smiled and said, yeah, very well. I was about 10 years old, standing on the corner of 163rd and Church. I said to myself, so he's going to grow up to become general. In those days, we're talking about the late 40s, early 50s, it was beyond any possible level of aspiration. Public schools were most of the major military schools were in the South. We're not allowed black people. What had happened? It happened because one family that his family was not a great student, and I learned that a good public school education can carry you far. I'm so committed to public school education.
Well, we'll talk about your career as you went through it, but did your parents live to see your accomplishments?
Not entirely. My father died before I got to know him. But my mother was there. And my family for years have been saying, why does he stand in line? Why does he sit down?
Asked that we assemble this group of troops so that they could pay tribute to him, but that is what he really wanted. He wanted to pay tribute to them.
Well, General, I think about, too, I mean, he was the last president to have served in combat,
Yep.
shot down
Yep.
During World War II, lost his two crewmates.
My son,
He
the
knows
doctor,
loss.
my
He
son,
knows
loss.
So, speaking of my son, the doctor, you grew up in an environment where you worked, and you worked, as you said before, in a store
The weekend after
and you learned
the
Yiddish.
insane invasion of
So,
Kuwait,
was
the
that
president was
unusual
out
for
of
people who are
Ashton giving a
African-American
speech.
to learn Yiddish?
For some Africans,
She said to him,
not for
it
me.
is reported,
The
how
block I
possible
grew up
this
on
is, I'm not really sure.
One block.
And whether it's the actual truth or not, I've never determined. But she essentially said, don't go wobbly, George, or something like that. As it was reported, George wasn't in the least bit going wobbly. He was just taking his time. And he came down.
There was a Sabbath boy synagogue across the street. There was Lowenstein's candy store. There was a Puerto Rican bodega, a Chinese laundry. Everybody was from somewhere else. Everybody was from out of the country. And so I grew up in this incredibly diverse environment. And then one day I tripped over this gentleman by the name of who was the owner of a toy store, and he asked me to come schlep some boxes, move some boxes around. I said yes, and he liked the way I did. They gave me 25 cents. And for 7 years, I worked on them also. But the story I've often told about Jacob is that he stopped me one day after I'd been there 2 years, on and off. He said, college, his nickname he had was kind of a Yiddish community called college. And what you should know, the store will go to the train. Don't want you to think that you can. I never thought I had a career there. But I was so touched that he took the time that he was thinking about and thought enough of me to say, get your education. And I've never forgotten it. I've written about it many times before it was this one
And I said to her, well, you know, Prime Minister Mr. Gorbachev says that he will do as much as he can for as long as he can, and then he will just step out of the way if that's appropriate. And she said, oh, young man, even I say things like that.
She also famously said that he's a man I can do business with. But she had this friendship with Ronald Reagan, who you also served. Can you help us understand and appreciate that?
They were very close. They were very close. And,
so he leaves it in the foundation.
you know, she and Brian Mulroney of Canada and Gorbachev and other great Western
we made
leaders,
this kid.
they all came together at a historic
And for the rest
moment
of
in time.
his life, every time I was in Palm Beach, go to Breakers,
it was
sit in the lobby of
remarkable
Breakers
how
with him.
all of them, even though you know they would say, well, Mr. Reagan didn't quite understand this aspect of missile defense or that aspect of intercontinental missiles. What they all did was understand Ronald Reagan and how he represented the American people. And not one of these great leaders, such as Margaret Thatcher, ever looked down on Ronald Reagan because they knew with Ronald Reagan they were seeing the American spirit.
Nobody knew what was going on in the room.
Colin Powell, we
Meeting
thank you
ended,
very
I came
much
out,
for
said
joining us
nothing.
this morning. We really
Staff outside. Shamir always closed mouth as usual, said nothing. So they had to make up something. So they decided to call New York right away, which always happens after you have a meeting. And they called me, want to hear? They were there for an hour, talked entirely in Yiddish. Why should I fool with a story like that? I mean, I've been going to lunch on it for the last 25 years.
So you went
I
to
do speak a little Yiddish, just a bit.
more than I do, but CCNY, you went there because it's inexpensive, right? You probably can afford to send you some fancy place, I guess a fancy, let's say.
True.
You majored in geology. Did you think you were going to be an oil person? Why did you major in geology?
Because I busted out of engineering. And my mother wanted me to become a civil engineer, but I didn't know. But after a few months, it was not agreeing with me. And so I had to leave civil engineering.
Chief of Staff during the first Gulf War. He was also President Reagan's national security advisor and Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. General, so good to have you here this morning. That story, too, really, what about the president's personal diplomacy? It helped him in this country immensely.
The story you just told is a familiar one because I knew the interpreter. And I can tell you he was terrified. He was always terrified. Putin had no problem. And Gorbachev was also an interesting person to see with President Bush and with President Reagan. And I was also national security advisor to Bush and to Reagan, of course, the last 2 years of the administration. And it was a fascinating period as the changeover is taking place between President Reagan and now President Bush.
And what was happening there with the Soviet Union was it was disintegrating. And talk a little bit about President Bush's restraint in dealing with that, because Democrats were saying, go take a victory lap.
No, he wouldn't do it. He would never do any such thing. His mother would come down on it. But that was the way he was almost in everything. After the Gulf War, American people were absolutely overjoyed with what they saw their soldiers sail, the German Marines doing. And New York wanted to have this massive ticker-tape parade, which they put together, going up Broadway, just like the old days. And Bush said, I'm not going to go. Mr. President, why not? This belongs to the troops.
3 years.
Not to me.
Okay. So after 3 years, you could have left the military and gone on and become something important like a private equity investor, something like that, right? But you decided not to do that, right?
By then, I had become a professional surgeon. I had been very fortunate to paratroops, Pathfinder, and the Rangers. It was my profession. And even though my relatives were uneasy about it, they finally realized that this is what he's going to do. And my wife and I had to go visit a senior aunt in the family. Everything was senior aunt. And Aunt Maurice was going to talk us out of the the whole family was worried. He was hurt twice. You're going to be killed if you get back. Oh my God, you got to get out. So we convinced her by saying, Maurice, that I can retire after 20 years at age 51 with 50% stay. Better than the post office stay. And they didn't bother us after that.
Well, my father worked in the post office, and I know what that's like. You retire when you're 55, and you get a pension. But
I really was a professional soldier. That's what my passion was.
Where did you meet your wife? And is it true that her family didn't think you were quite good enough for her?
Yes, that's true. She ought to tell this story, but we met on a blind date. A friend of mine took me on a blind date to cut out his girlfriend and her. We were both two officers stationed in Fort Devon, Massachusetts. Alan was off to jail for hard hearing, and she was rooming with another attorney. And so I went on this blind date. She did not like blind dates. She didn't think it was and so she was all set to dismiss me as soon as I walked in. But I walked in and we hit it off. She tells the story. She went and lost her face. Came back and we were little. And it worked out.
Her family was happy with us?
Well, I wouldn't quite put it that way. Her mother met me. I knew her mother quite well, but I hadn't never known her father. And then in August, I guess it was, 1962, I got ordered to be one of the first group of advisors going in under President Kennedy. And I drove into her apartment and told her I was going to Vietnam and it's going to be a year. I'm going to wait for a whole year. I'm going to wife her. And she just looked at me and said, "What do you hope I hate you?" Yeah. She said, "Well, I won't." A year, that's it. That's all there is. And so I drove back to Fort Devon and realized you're about to make a big mistake. Went back in and she married me. We were married 10 days later, I guess it was, in Birmingham, Alabama. We were 10 days to get ready.
Did you have someone go get the paints for you?
Birmingham?
You did, yeah.
Uniform.
Have you been to an art supply store? Isn't it fun to go in there
My father
and
came,
see
my
the things?
sister's brother-in-law came.
What is this little?
Her whole family was there. And his father looked at me rather disapprovingly, even as he stood
That's what he understood.
Well, General, thank you so much for talking about his legacy, and I think the values that many people are mourning as well. Thank you so much.
But he and I became the very best of friends until he passed on. It was a wonderful family.
So you segregated south. Was it easy to find a hotel for a honeymoon here?
Yeah, there was a black hotel in Birmingham. That was the only hotel we could go to. You know, it's interesting because in those days, mid-50s, early 60s, 460s, the military was the most socially progressive institution in America. So I could be stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, with Alma and Child Michael. And Columbus, Georgia was right outside the gate. And on Fort Benning, it was totally integrated. The Army said we're going to do it. And you dare not speak against what we were doing with respect to integration, even though there was resistance. But as soon as you drove out the gate, you were back in the segregated South. I was thrown out of hamburger joints. I was stopped by a cop in Sylacauga, Alabama one night. He thought I was speeding on my way from Birmingham around the road back to Fort Benning. And I was driving my Volkswagen that I brought home from Germany a couple of years earlier. He stopped me and he was about to give me a ticket, but he walked around the car. He saw this foreign car, German car. He saw this black guy driving it. He saw the New York license plate, and he saw an LBJ all the way sticker. And he walked around to me and he said, "Boy, you better get out of here as fast as you can." And I did. But that was the South then. And I think Al and I will both always remember when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed in July of that year. And I was able to go back down to the hamburger place that had thrown me out. We got hamburger. It was a burden that was lifted not just off African Americans, but off all Americans, especially a burden lifted off white Americans. A burden they've been carrying for so many years. But the problem is not solved. It's not over. There's still residual problems that we're dealing with, and we see it every day in our public life now. But we've come a long way since 1958.